Watch any traffic stop video on the internet long enough, and you will start to notice something strange. The officer walks up to the car, talks to the driver, take the license, walks back to his cruiser. A few minutes pass. Then he walks back to the car a second time. And almost every driver sitting there with their hands on the wheel assumes the second trip means the same thing as the first. It does not. The second trip is a completely different event, run under completely different rules with completely different stakes. What happens in the next 90 seconds will decide whether the driver goes home tonight or spends the rest of the evening watching his car being torn apart on the side of the road. Tonight, I am going to show you exactly what the officer was doing during those quiet minutes in his cruiser, why the second walk is the one that matters, and the single sentence that protects you the moment he reaches your window. Subscribe if you want these lessons to keep finding you before you need them. Chapter 1. A Tuesday evening on a quiet road. Let's call him David. David is 37 years old. He owns a small contracting business. He has 2 kids in middle school and a wife who teaches at the local elementary. On the night this happened, he was driving home from a job site, tired, dusty, and looking forward to dinner. He had a tail light out. He did not know it. The officer who pulled him over did. David did everything right on the first contact. Hands on the wheel where the officer could see them. Window all the way down, engine off, license, registration, and insurance handed over without a word. A calm tone of voice, no nervous over-explaining. The officer was polite, told him about the tail light, took the documents and said, "Sit tight, I will be right back." Then he turned around and walked to his cruiser. And here is where most drivers in this country make their biggest mistake of the whole stop. They relax. David relaxed too. He had no idea the most important part of the stop was about to happen, and he was not even in the room for it. Chapter 2. 4 things happening while you sit there. When that officer walks back to his cruiser the first time, he is not just running your license. He is doing 4 things at once, and you are not present for any of them. You need to know what those 4 things are, because they decide everything about what happens next. He is running your information through the National Crime Information Center to check for warrants, prior arrests, and active investigation flags. He is verifying that your plate matches your vehicle, that the registration is current, and that the car has not been reported stolen. He is replaying the first contact in his head, writing notes about whether you seemed nervous, whether your hands shook, whether anything in the car looked out of place. He is making one final decision. Let this driver go with a warning or push the stop into something bigger. That last point is the one that matters. The decision is made in the cruiser, not at your window. By the time he opens his door and starts walking back, the decision is already final. And whichever way it went, you are not going to be told. Chapter 3. The Supreme Court ruling that changes everything. You cannot understand the second walk without understanding the law that controls it. In 2015, the Supreme Court of the United States decided a case called Rodriguez versus United States, and it became the most important traffic stop ruling of the last 20 years. The court ruled that a traffic stop can only last as long as it takes to handle the original reason for the stop. The implications of that ruling are simple but powerful. The stop ends the moment the officer finishes the task he pulled you over for. He cannot extend the stop even by a few minutes to go fishing for unrelated crimes. The only exception is if he develops independent reasonable suspicion during the original stop. Any evidence found after that point without legal justification can be challenged in court. This is the case the officer is thinking about when he walks back to your car the second time. He knows the clock is running out. He knows that whatever he wants to do next has to either fit inside the original stop or convince you to volunteer your way past Rodriguez. And volunteering is exactly what most drivers do without realizing it. Chapter 4. 2 very different second walks. The second walk looks like one event from the outside, but it is actually 2 completely different scenarios depending on what the officer decided in the cruiser. Once you know how to tell them apart, you will never watch a traffic stop the same way again. If he decided to let you go, the second walk is short and quick. If he decided to push for more, the second walk is slower and ends with a question. The first version ends with you driving away in under a minute. The second version ends with you on the shoulder for the next hour. The difference between those 2 outcomes is not the officer's mood. It is one word that comes out of your mouth in the next 10 seconds. That word is the entire game. and most drivers say it without ever knowing what it cost them. Chapter 5. The question disguised as politeness. If the officer chose the second path, he will hand you back your documents first. That single act is the trick most drivers miss. Handing back your documents legally ends the original traffic stop under Rodriguez. You are now, in the eyes of the law, free to leave. But before your hand even reaches the gear shifter, the officer asks a question. It almost always sounds like one of these. Hey, before you go, mind if I ask you a couple things? Hey, you got a minute for me? Hey, anything in the car I should know about? Hey, would you mind if I take a quick look around? That question is the single most important moment of the entire encounter. Because the original stop is legally over, you do not have to answer. You do not have to stay. You do not have to roll your window back down. But 99 out of 100 drivers conditioned by a lifetime of politeness say sure, go ahead, and in that one word, they have just consented to a brand new, voluntary, second encounter. The protections of Rodriguez vanish the moment they agree. Chapter 6. The night David lost 3 hours. David did not know any of this. When the officer walked back to his window the second time, handed him a written warning for the taillight, and then asked if he had a minute for a couple of quick questions, David said sure. He was tired. He was polite. He had nothing to hide. He thought saying yes would get him home faster. It did the exact opposite. The questions escalated step by step in a way David did not see coming. Where are you coming from? What were you doing there? How long were you there? Whose property is that? Do they know you were there? Can you prove it? Have you ever been arrested? Any drugs in the car? Any weapons in the car? Would you mind if I took a quick look in the truck bed? By the time David realized the conversation had completely changed, 20 minutes had passed, a second officer had arrived, and a K-9 unit was on the way. He stood on the shoulder of the road in the cold, watching strangers go through his tools, his glove box, and his life. They found nothing. 3 hours of his night were gone. All of it started with one word at the second walk. Sure. Chapter 7. The 5 words you need in your pocket. There is a sentence that exists in American law for exactly this moment, and it is the one thing standing between you and David's story. The next time you see that officer walking back to your window for the second time, and he asks if you have a minute, your answer is calm, polite, and final. Officer, am I free to go? Those 5 words do 4 things at once. They force the officer to either release you or formally detain you. They preserve every Rodriguez protection you have at that moment. They prevent any voluntary consent from being assumed against you. They create a clear record on body cameras that you did not waive your rights. Memorize them the way you memorized your own birthday. If the answer is yes, you drive away. If the answer is no, you say nothing else, you do not consent to any searches, and you wait. The argument is not won on the side of the road. The argument is won in a courtroom later with a lawyer, where arguments actually work. Chapter 8. Why this one sentence changes everything. The reason "Am I free to go" is so powerful is because it shifts the entire legal weight of the encounter back onto the officer. Before those words, the conversation is voluntary, and anything you say is on you. After those words, the conversation is no longer voluntary, and anything the officer does has to be legally justified. The shift creates real protections that did not exist a second earlier. The officer can no longer rely on your silence as implied consent. Any extension of the stop now requires articulable reasonable suspicion. Any search conducted after this point can be challenged in court as unlawful. Any statement you make from this point forward is protected differently. This is not a magic phrase that makes officers leave you alone. It is a legal phrase that makes the system work the way it was designed to work. The Constitution does not protect you automatically. It protects you when you use it. Those 5 words are how you use it. What to carry home from tonight. The next time you find yourself on the side of a road, watching an officer walk back toward your car for the second time, I want you to remember tonight. The first walk was the law doing its job. The second walk is the law being tested. The officer already made his decision in the cruiser, and the only thing left to decide is whether you make his job easier or whether you quietly, calmly, and lawfully stand on the rights the Constitution gave you. David did not know. David said yes. David lost 3 hours of his life and a piece of his trust in a system he had always believed in. You do not have to be David. You only have to remember 5 words. Am I free to go? Say them at the right moment, and the second walk becomes the last walk, and you go home to the people who are waiting for you. If this video helped you tonight, send it to one person in your life who drives. A husband, a wife. A son is starting to drive for the first time. A friend who works night shifts and knows the long, quiet roads. The lesson you just learned is the kind of lesson that travels. Pass it on. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Every week I break down another piece of the law that the average driver was never taught in plain English, using real cases, so that the next time it is your car on the shoulder, you are not the one guessing. You are the one who already knows. Hit subscribe, turn the bell on, and I will see you in the next lesson. Until then, keep your hands visible, keep your words few, and drive safe out there.